Very busy this morning, so I'm going to talk a little bit about what I'm working on right now. A couple of recruiters are interested in what I know about AI, and I'll have to go from a principled point of view. I've been in this career for 30 years, and I'm going to try to tell you how I work. And how I work, because it is work, is a process of discovery, um, and the technical term is chunking, but I call it block and tackle. And that's about organizing pieces of work to be done according to what human beings do and what computers do, and what computers who are directing programming computers have to do in order to make sure the computer actually does the right thing. People are kind of freaking out about AI because there are a lot of things that computers are now demonstrating that nobody believed humans could do, or that computers could do, because the task is so difficult to represent it in the way that we've been thinking about computer programming paradigms. So where did I start? I started at Xerox. And I started at Xerox because they were thinking about the office of the future. And their designs and their theoretical stuff handles a lot of this. Now, just as an example, I'll just say there's two kinds of thinking. There's computer thinking and there's human thinking. And humans can recognize all kinds of things or gestures or facial expressions such that there's more that's communicated than just the speech. So we now have computers that can do text to speech and speech to text, but we don't have any robots that can do facial expressions that are realistic. That's basically programmed by human beings. I could do Nano Banana version 2 right now that puts a look of puzzlement or on somebody's face, and they do a pretty decent job. But doing that in real time is something that computers are never going to do. That's why Zoom is making a fortune, because you can get human beings gestures in presentations, which adds to the value of the presentation. So excuse me. So what am I doing with AI? Basically, around the beginning of November, I had an epiphany, and that increased the way that I do prompting. So I can remember a year or so ago when there was an application out for a prompt engineer at OpenAI, and they were paying $400,000. And I was like, I could probably do this, but I had no idea what the AI people are saying to themselves. So I use Nate B. Jones as my person. He's very thorough. He's coming up with a lot of material, and I'm not all the way ready to decide what's useful to me or not, but I have at least 25 prompts of his that I'm using as templates for organizing certain kinds of things that I want to do. Now, somebody, like I said, is interested in my my ability to do interactive AI, and I have a good idea of what I want to do, but I use AI to tell me what I have done already. And these things are not always right up to in front of mind. So I use AI to bring stuff that I know that I've done front of mind. And that's very different when you're in an office where you have everything than when you are in a business and you are working with other people. And so you understand what these people are working on, you understand the context of the business, and you understand the context of what you are doing in your project at this particular moment. And those contexts are very important when somebody's asking you a direct question. And I'm very good with those, but not when I'm talking to a recruiter or just abstractedly saying, well, what do you know? You say you've been in business for 30 years. Do you know this? Do you know this? Do you know this? Well, there's different levels. And one of the things that I'm trying to do in this video, which I will ultimately translate into text and then abstract that text and then review it manually with me and write it, because I'm a very good communicator and writer, is to get a categorical understanding of those things without missing anything. And then I'm going to put that in a context bucket so that it can be mined in the future for when people say, well, did you do anything like this? Let me be specific, because right now I have worked for about 11, 12, 13 years with Vertica. And Vertica was the premier analytical data warehouse engine. And they built it to do analytics. And so the engineering team, and I've met a lot of those people, have, of course, Walkowskis is the guy, Steve, have embedded all the stuff for machine learning into SQL syntax. So the way that they've optimized the query engine and all of those things, the way they do stuff with projections that gives you alternate ways of getting performance from the same SQL query, is what the rest of the world has been doing with PySpark and TensorFlow. So as somebody who does back ends, somebody says, well, what do you know about ML pipelines? And I'm like, I don't have to know anything about ML pipelines because I put it in Vertica, which you give gigantic servers for in an MPP scale out kind of architecture, and I don't have to do this. Whereas PySpark people are saying, can I do a chunk of this on my workstation? Oh no, I have to launch a fleet of whatevers, DBUs, I guess, or DUs is the terminology that Snowflake people use or Databricks people use. I'm not exactly sure. Or if you're just doing Kubernetes clusters of things that are running TensorFlow, then that's an ML pipeline, and you got all this mess to contend with, where all I had to do is just regular ETL or ELT and load it into a Vertica cluster, and then I have 7 very powerful servers, maybe with 256 gig of RAM each, and they just go at it. And it's already parallelized, and they already, specific to that. So I just had, I get into situations where there are people who don't know Vertica, and now I have something that says I've done 67. That's a very specific thing. So in the context of what I do for interactive AI, I've been using Warp for over a year, and that came out of some boredom when I was at OpenText. The engineering team that I was originally with, that was acquired by Vertica, we were the people that put Vertica into the AWS cloud. It became known as Vertica Accelerator. And as our project, it was full 360 EDW, Elastic Data Warehouse. And we lost that team. And since I had sales experience, I went over to the sales team. And the sales team was in a transition internally to the company to take over certain aspects of leadership. But the marketing really wasn't done. There was nobody at Micro Focus or OpenText who understood the context of how many people are doing data science, how many people, and what the capability of data science was within the Vertica product. So I think their hardest discussion was to think about if we are a company of a branded company that has a bunch of products or a company that has multiple product brands. And they went with the former just to say everybody knows that we're open text and we have so many customers worldwide, kind of the Microsoft approach. As soon as we put it out there, everybody will download it and then we'll just cross sell into our established base. But the established base was competing with Snowflake, and Snowflake was doing an order of magnitude better marketing, and also the industry of machine learning and data science was, dominated by TensorFlow, dominated by PySpark. There may be one other thing in there, but it's all data frames, pandas, polars now, and DuckDB, and we'll get back to DuckDB. So, let me just say, I expect DuckDB to do everything that Vertica did as a single big node thing. So I think all data science will get into DuckDB, and that which doesn't could be done in the Postgres Duck Lake stuff. I'm not absolutely sure, but that's the direction that I'm thinking. That will go, and really I don't have a confident handle on how big a data stream for machine learning is that people generally do. Okay, and I haven't researched it, but I have an idea, just like I had the same nagging suspicion with Hadoop, that Hadoop scaling is something that makes sense to people who never did databases beyond MySQL and CouchDB. All right, and those are web-oriented people who are not dealing with VLDB data streams or IoT data streams or the kind of stuff that I've been doing in my career. Even though most of my finance and fin apps are smaller than that. At any rate, I am looking at AI, conversational AI, in the following way. Again, I use Warp, and Warp is a terminal that's run on Mac, built in Rust, and they keep adding features to it all the time. I'm literally every week for a year and a half now, I've been using that and updating it. It has access and a very economical pricing model for me to invoke mostly Claude. So I can do Claude Opus 4.5. All right, Opus, not just the little ones. And so I have that thinking model. I also have Gemini 3. I also have GPT 5.1. Separately from that, I have an Anthropic Claude Code that I don't use because it burns through tokens like nobody's business. And I have Gemini, and I have GPT 5.1 separate. So those I have. I don't know if Google is billing me for Gemini, but I don't use it that often. I don't remember what I'm being charged for GPT, and it's basically beneath the radar. But when I use Claude Code directly, I ran through $50 in a week, and I was like, this isn't worth it. Now that may change depending on how either Zed or Warp change their pricing structure, because they have to figure out their business models going forward, and nobody really knows. So I'm using Zed, but I'm turned off the AI in that because I hate type ahead. I like it sometimes when I'm doing edits and it picks up the pattern of what I'm doing. It'll do it for the rest of that stuff. But for the most part, I do not like my IDE to be loaded with stuff. I want a separate and distinct vibe coding. And here's what I do with my vibe coding. I'm doing it primarily to translate stuff that I've already done in Ruby or Python to Go and Rust. Now Rust I'm going to drop because I don't absolutely positively need it. The performance that I get from Go and the Go routines that are concurrent processing stuff is as much performance as I believe that I need in the back end stuff that I'm going to be doing in data engineering. Okay, so I could say that I wasted some time learning Rust and the borrowing and the borrow checker and all that stuff. I still love the compiler. It's beautiful. I wish somebody, and probably somebody may, incorporate some of those features into Go in future versions. Nevertheless, Go is now my go-to language. I was around when it first started. I was impressed by they said, how it handled the parallelism and that kind of stuff. Even though, well, I don't use it that much, but I care a lot about the performance of the back end. That's all. I've always been a data guy, moving data to the places where the human beings can do their kind of thinking and the computers can do their kind of thinking. So it turned, and I have something on the order of 500 to 700 repos of work that I've done throughout my career. I mean, but since Git, I have a lot of, I have a lot more that I haven't Gitified because I wasn't running my own Git server, but I have now. So that leads us into the next thing, which is what am I actually doing with the AIs? There's three things. The first is very obvious. I'm using it as a search engine. So it's a search engine that brings back paragraphs, and then I can ask follow-up questions to those paragraphs. And generally speaking, most of my stuff is like that, and I use GPT for that because it keeps the history of all my stuff. And I can organize that into folders, which are projects. So I do that, for example, for my father's health. And so I can second guess doctors, and I can keep a longitudinal track of those. Now, I just thought about the fact that I could get MCP to do some of that and bring it down to my workstation, because if it's not on my workstation, it doesn't count. And my workstation is powerful as hell now. I'm 1,000 now, so I might as well have it all. And I have several. I'd say I'd have about 50 terabytes here of storage, which is more than enough for what my purposes are. So that's the first thing that I'm doing with AI is I'm doing that, and there's interactive learning. So for example, it's getting better at finding resources out there, and Gemini is pretty good. Grok is really good in terms of encapsulating languages. I think it's good to compare them against each other. If you want to really do something, then you should run at least two. And Claude I generally keep just for my administration. So that's the second thing that I do. The second thing that I do is this is my rack of home lab. So I have 2 Mac servers and 4 Linux servers. On the primary one, I'm running Vault, I'm running Postgres, I'm running GitLab, I'm running Netbox, I'm running some other stuff that I don't use so often. I'm considering TwinGate so I can VPN and do stuff remote, but I almost never leave this place because I have my piano here. And then, honestly, there's a list of things. I know there's 12, but I don't know what they are. They're not front of mind, and I could ask. And I have a web page that tells me exactly what's in the Southwall. This is Southwall. This is my Southwall project. So I'm doing DevOps at home so that I have a hybrid environment that when I need to use a cloud-based service, then I'll use that. But most of the time, I'll do it here. I also don't like to use containers. I like to run stuff bare metal, just because of the added complexity of what it takes to do things inside the container once I've done and built that. And I've used Alpine, I've used Amazon Linux, I've used CentOS going all the way back. So I'm very conversant with it, but then I will use AI to build Docker containers for me, and I will specify them there. And again, understand that I'm more of an architect than a coder, but I'm competent coder, and I want to do that. I want to extend my Go. Go is going to be my lingua franca if I can help it, and I'll do Python to be compatible, but I don't like Python. I think it's fragile, honestly, because I don't. I know there's a way that I can use UV and RIL. Is it RIL? No, RIL's the web interface. Rough, to debug and make that stuff simpler. And I was using something prior to that. I never liked Conda, and I tolerate pip. But there was something before UV that I used, and the name of it I forget. But UV really solved all of my headaches, most of my headaches with Python. I run 3.11 because that's kind of stable, and that's kind of the problem with Python. You get a new version, and so much stuff has to be swapped in and out, and I'm like, just give me a library that runs, and that's what Go gives me. So Go is at 125, and that's what I like. I used to use Ruby because we're doing object-oriented stuff, and we built a DSL for back-end pipeline stuff for Vertica. What is the third thing that I'm doing? The third thing that I'm doing, so the second thing I'm doing is DevOps, and I'm using Ansible. I didn't have to learn Ansible. I hated Chef, but I'm doing that to configure my home lab, and I will insert TerraGrunt and Terraform into that stack of DevOps stuff and CI/CD. All right, this is just moving stuff around. Let's just schlepping. This is the modern equivalent of what we used to call a tape ape back in the IBM days. So that's the second use, which extends my productivity. The stuff that I used to throw over the transom to the SREs, site reliability engineers, and DevOps, specialists who were very good and didn't have an AI to tell them CloudFormation is lousy, but Terraform is great. And then I know we struggled with that during the 2010s. So, second is DevOps. I will put in DevSecOps for that, and I would put in, the web hooks that talk to multiple things, and that's where I would use MCP, but I haven't used it yet because I'm just doing the lifting, not the communication of the lifting to a team. Now, the third thing that I'm doing, which is the newest thing, and this is one of the things that's giving me a significant advantage, I guess, is that I am doing more sophisticated prompts. So I will have a typical prompt just for my operational stuff is 40 words. Like, I want you to go and look and see. I want you to upgrade everything on this server, and I want to make sure that when you reboot, all the services come up and that Vault is unsealed so people can immediately use Vault, etc., etc. That's the operational stuff that I would do. And then the more sophisticated stuff that I'm doing now is twofold. So the first is search engine. The second is DevOps. The third is prompting and prompt cycles. So I can have a prompt that calls another prompt, and the prompt will have the details. So what I'm doing is making didactic language, and I'm using some templates that Nate B. Jones puts together and puts out there so that I understand his work cycle and I understand how he processes stuff. So I've used that to do the first thing that I've done is to do it for career stuff. So over 30 years, I've done, dozens of projects, scores of projects, and what technology was I using when, and what was the cool thing about that project. I have that this way where I think about it geographically and with the people that I worked with, but I don't think about the tools and that stuff. My job is customer satisfaction, project delivery, and making sure that the time that I spend with the customer, I get the most bang for my buck, in which I have to give developer priorities and I have to say, the customer needs this. The customer has never seen this other stuff before. They're going for a vague productivity goal that Anderson or Deloitte sold them, but none of those people actually know how these tools work, and they don't know what can go wrong. So I've done the blocking and tackling, and I've done this SOW in response to the RFP, and the sales guys have signed the deal. Now let's deliver this, and then this is the first thing that you have to build. This is the thing where you have to mind your P's and Q's on security, and here's the thing where it has to be just fast. And if it's not fast, we don't even need to be here. Okay? So that kind of work and details of that stuff, that's what I have in all my files. That goes in the big docs. Okay? So then I know I have an ADOG, which is what I call, a list of all the people, what their functions are, what their phone numbers, it's that project specific stuff. And luckily, I'm a pack rat. So I literally have stuff that goes back all the way to a 4GL programming that I made, which was an SQL generator. All right. And I had a navigation set. So it was like a 60-byte array that controlled everything, that controlled the navigation for front end before there was visual object programming, before Visual Basic, okay? When it was just vectors and squares on a screen, and you click on this space and something would pop out based on the star schema select of dimension X, whatever that is. So yeah, I did that stuff in '92 at Philip Morris and CPC across in Englewood Cliffs, New Jersey. And that's the stuff. That's what I remember. That, and I worked with Randy Eisenband, and so I remember that stuff. And then they called in Metaphor, and then they stretched their budget because the Metaphor people came in hot and heavy, and they never finished either project. So that was a crazy thing. And literally we were running out of compute space. There were things that people wanted to know. I'm getting sidetracked. So let's go back to the third thing that I'm doing with AI. The multi-pass prompting is, I want you to, the first thing I've done is for my career. So I can cut and paste a document, which is a job description. I put it in my inbox and I say, use the standard assessment prompt to process this. And the standard assessment prompt says you are a guide and you're going to evaluate the applicability of my CV to the skills and requirements of this job. You're going to tell me if it's a good match, a very good match, a bad match, a low ball, or something we should put on hold and come back to another time. So that's the big categorization, and then there's specifics about the scaffolding of where this goes on the machine, etc., etc. Then there's a couple others. There's a process that I want to do that gets me deeper into prompts that generate prompts, and that is called intent. So I'm starting from intent. Here's what I want to do. Let's go back and forth so I come up with a framework for getting that accomplished. All right. and that's a thing that I'm going to perfect. That's the next step. The other thing that I use it for is for translation of code. So, like I said, I have ump repos. A lot of it's written in Ruby. My producers and consumers and ingesters, and I will convert those to Python, and I will convert them to Go. And ultimately, I want them to be compiled in Go that I can run in Lambdas or in ECS or whatever the equivalent of that is in other systems. And that's where I expect to use AI, because GCP is a tangled wood, and that's because it's not code first. And I've been code first for a long time, and I want to avoid products that do all this UI stuff. I'm just like, what's the config? What do I need to have here? Don't navigate me through all these pages, and I get a little frustrated by that. And so I will use AI to get me behind the scenes. I'll give you a perfect example. I was working with Teva Pharmaceuticals, and there was nobody who knew everything. Okay, there were the people. There was the one person that I talked to in New Jersey, and then there was her boss, and then there were the people who actually did stuff, and they put it into Salesforce. So when they wanted to ingest a new customer's data from S3, they put it into Salesforce, which uses SOQL, and then I had to put that into DynamoDB and debug that, and then go through this cycle that I don't even remember. But I know there was SOQL, and if there was a syntax error, it took a day for me to get the feedback, sometimes 2 days, for how this is supposed to go. And nobody would ever be able to tell me at a high level how this fits into the architecture or what kinds of things trigger the request to do that. And that's because they segregate the responsibilities and blah, 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 blah. My aim is to use temporal and prefect up from obviously cron and airflow to handle the complexities of whatever work rules that I have. So my strength throughout the years has been to be able to understand business processes and the computer capabilities of everybody in that demand chain of functional responsibility, and see what they need to know at what point in the business cycle. That is very clear if you're in finance, or if you're a trader, or you're on Wall Street, or you're in banking and you're processing loans, or you're doing KYC. But in other industries, especially healthcare, it's a mess. And nobody has gone through that stuff and said, this is how you optimize this business rule, this work rule, this union requirements, these security requirements to match what people have been doing here. So let's reorganize that. And again, I cut my teeth doing ERP integration, where those roles are pretty firm in most companies, and most companies, spent all their money on SAP to do that, and they spent all their money on Hyperion to integrate with that. So that is the thing that I expect to get out of temporal. I expect that there will be a better defined subset of data for corpus pipelines and training, scheduling, And that's very opaque to an outsider who's not working at one of those frontier companies. But it's going to come out. So I'm going to use those tools. So I can vibe code with that stuff, and the better I get at idiomatic Go, the better I'll be off. Again, I can do the Python stuff. I don't want to do it. I understand idiomatic Python, but most of everything that people are doing with Python, polars, and pandas, I could do in Vertica, and I didn't have to bother with the pipeline stuff. So I will vibe code, although again I will not put this onto my onto my IDE to do this type of head stuff. I will code that myself and understand what I meant when I put this proc here, and what it's supposed to accomplish and how it might fail. So I want to know that stuff ahead of time, and then I'll let the AI look at it. But some of it I'll go the other way, and that's AI reverse engineering. So there it is. That's everything that I wanted to say this morning, and talk to you later.